Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, Can-Am Missing Project. A copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. Yeah, thank you for being here. You know, it's great having the ability to communicate the way we do on almost daily basis and to get your feedback on comments, etc. But I've got to say, there's nothing better than sitting across and meeting people at conferences. I feel humbly blessed that so many have come my way. And from all across the globe, sometimes takes my breath away. Sometimes people walk away and Angie and I look at each other and go, wow. One of those really nice moments this last weekend happened when the director of MUFON Brazil came to me and introduced himself. And he said, Dave, I know all about you. I followed your work. I'm always looking for cases for you. There's a case I want to talk to you about. And he went on and on and on. Wow. I realize that there's language barriers with countries. I get that. Well, this person spoke really good English. And I know that there's a large population in Brazil that speak English as well. Many of them have learned it as a second language. But to have people that humbly come up and talk to me and understand the work, say that they've watched the channels, wow, thank you. And these people also put me onto new cases that I never would have known about because of language barriers and etc. Another thing that came up a lot was the question, how many of my cases have serious injuries, mutilations to the body. And I gotta say that is so rare. You could probably count the number of cases, 3 or less, that I've researched that I would actually say fit our profile. And the chances are that the bodies were probably suffered predation post-death, my guess. One news bit I'll tell you about. About 10 miles from where I live, up in the mountains, just north of Whitefish, Montana, 2 hunters, just a few days ago, were up in the woods scouting terrain for upcoming bow season in about a month. And there were 2 of them, and they were walking through the woods, very thick woods, and they got jumped by a grizzly bear, and her cub was nearby. They said that they heard her before they saw her at about 10-15 feet from them, charging them. They turned, they each fired. They ended up killing a 24-year-old bear. That's a really old grizzly bear with a very small cub. In the process, in the chaos of this charge, one of the people, there were 2 men, one of them was shot in the shoulder. And it was unclear if he shot himself because the bear jumped him or his partner shot him. Very, very common in that I could see this happening. In the struggle, if the bear is on top of you, you're just probably firing for your life. And that bullet could go through the bear and hit your partner. You just don't know. I'm surprised more people aren't killed this way. Making a long story short, the 2 men got off the mountain. One went to North Valley Hospital in Whitefish and was later transferred to another hospital. And the people involved notified Montana game wardens who notified U.S. Fish and Wildlife, because it's a protected species still, of what they did. The decision that came down just recently was that it was a justifiable kill because of an attack. Why do I tell you about this? Because these are becoming more common in Montana because there's more grizzly bear. And anyone who tells you that the grizzly bear are nearing extinction or they aren't doing well, complete garbage. Complete garbage. There are so many grizzly bear right now in Montana that our state legislature is trying to get the feds to take off the protection orders against the grizzly bear and open them up for limited hunting. The number of predation cases against livestock, etc., are nearing record highs. Now, since I love being in the woods, I am not looking forward to having a confrontation with a bear. But sooner or later, you spend enough time in the woods in Montana, chances are you're going to have one. And just like these two guys were heavily armed, probably saved their life. But if I had to take a bear's life, I wouldn't feel good about it. No. Not under those circumstances. Especially when she was protecting her, in her mind, protecting her baby. And Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife put up some traps in that area trying to trap the baby because they understand it would just die out there. And so they probably put it in there's several bear wildlife centers in the Northwest where that baby would do well. So, thankfully to report that the two men are okay. Now, what are we talking about here today? First case is an updated case I wrote about in my book, Missing 411 Idaho. And I thought that what I'd do is I'd just read to you what I wrote. I don't do that very often, but I thought I would. So this is page 255. Man's name was Jack Thomas. That's Jack's photo. Here's what I wrote. Went missing June 17th, 2016, just north of Atlanta, Idaho. Age 66 years. Since the start of my research on missing people, I've been an advocate for everyone that goes into the woods to carry a personal locator beacon. These devices are the size of an old flip cell phone and cost between $150 and $400. There are a few different types, but in general, when activated, they send a signal from the device to a satellite, which relays the signal to the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA contacts the local law enforcement jurisdiction for the area and advises them they have an emergency activation. The jurisdiction then dispatches a search and rescue team to the GPS coordinates they were sent by satellite. There are PLBs, personal locator beacons, that are built into satellite phones. I carry one. There are also standalone PLBs that just send a signal. Others allow users to send a satellite message to a friend telling them your status. This is the type of transponder that Jack Thomas was carrying. He was prepared. He was a very smart, very experienced outdoorsman who loved hiking alone. I couldn't get many details of Mr. Thomas's past other than he lived in the area of Nampa, Idaho. He was married, a father, and had very little else about him that was released to the public. It appeared that the family wanted to stay out of the public eye during the search. And I respect that. But, I've said many times that if a family doesn't get involved in a search, then the search will never be as long as it should be. Just the realities of it. Families need to get involved. On June 13th, 2016, Jack drove to the Queens River Trailhead, 7 miles outside of Atlanta, Idaho. He told friends and family he was doing a 3-day Queens River Loop trail. He left on the 13th with an intention of being out of the woods on the 16th. On June 15th, he notified his family through a satellite message via the transponder that he was okay. He was last seen on the trail between Fern Falls and Elk Lake, just past Pitchfork Creek, and was heading towards the trail on June 16th. This was the last contact anyone had with him. When he didn't contact family members on June 16th, they reported him as a missing person to the Elgin County Sheriff. Okay. There's a lot more to my story, and I'll read you the rest in a second. Now here's the Queens River Trailhead. The loop is like this. I'll talk about this in a second. Here's Atlanta. Here's Pine, Prairie, and Dixie and Castle Rocks. This is another picture. He's in good shape. Jack was a very wise hiker. Elmore County took charge of the search and rescue effort immediately and called for additional assistance from outside agencies. They received additional support from the Elmore County Search and Rescue, Twin Falls Sheriff, Idaho Mountain Search and Rescue, Life Flight, Idaho Air National Guard helicopters, 2 UH-60s, 2 Bear Air Montana, Atlanta Fire, Ada Aerial Sheriff's fixed-wing plane, Blaine County Search and Rescue, U.S. Forest Service, and more. The search went for 10 days and was terminated June 27th with nothing being found. An unbelievable fact considering the circumstances. Yeah, I'd say so. When Elmore County pulled out, the family went to social media to raise money to hire the John Francis Foundation. 10 years earlier, the Francises had lost a son to the exact Sawtooth Mountains where Jack had vanished. They orchestrated another comprehensive search that placed tracking canines with GPS collars, ground teams, and other searchers into the field. A multi-day effort by the foundation failed to locate Jack. Every article describing the hiker stated that he was an extremely fit and thoroughly competent backpacker with years and years of experience. I would add also that he was smart. He was using the proper technology, which should have found him. This is the first, listen carefully, this is the first time I have ever written about anyone using a PLB that transmitted his or her location who wasn't found. I can attest from personal experience that the unexpected can happen in the wilderness. Oh yes, I can. For sure. In 2016, same year that Jack disappeared, I was in a remote area of Australia filming a segment on a missing person and carrying a camera rig over my shoulder. It had rained the night before and I slipped going over a boulder. I saved the camera, which was my main goal, but broke my left leg. I was very fortunate to have been with someone who I have great trust, and she helped me get out. Angie. In my younger days, I traveled into highly remote regions without a sat phone or transponder. I was stupid, I didn't know. My guess is that 95% of everyone I write about could be alive today if they'd been carrying some type of satellite transponder. I don't have a good answer on what might have happened to Jack. Here's one interesting data point, however. I do not know of anyone who has disappeared while carrying a firearm and a PLB, though I did write an entire book about people who disappeared while carrying a firearm missing 411 hunters. This is the front of the book. And then we took this picture in Hell's Canyon when we were traveling through, right in the book. That's my ugly mug. Put my thumb over that. Hell's Canyon was beautiful. Now, Jack's family mounted a big search. And when you get people like the John Francis Foundation involved, usually get some pretty good results. They bring canines in, etc. They don't find anything. Something's wrong. Okay, Idaho Statesman, August 28th, 2023. Idaho hiker went missing in the Sawtooths in 2016. Were finally found. Jack Thomas was 66 years old when he went missing on June 15th, 2016, while hiking in the backcountry near Atlanta, about 35 miles east of Idaho City. 7 years later, his remains were finally found. Boise County officials told the Idaho Statesman on Monday. Boise and Elmore County officials searched for Jack Thomas for 2 weeks after he went missing near the Queens River trailhead. According to prior Statesman reporting, the Nampa man had transmitted his location using a GPS on June 15th, but did not return as expected the day after. Boise County Sheriff Scott Turner told the Statesman that some backcountry hikers in the Sawtooth located some of Thomas's personal remains in late July of this year. They shared the GPS location of the items: a wallet, some clothing, and a hiking boot, with Elmore County officials who determined the location was actually over in Boise County line. Turner told the Statesman officials were 99.9% sure they had located Thomas thanks to the items that were found. Turner said it took a few weeks to coordinate a search effort. The agency hired Sawtooth outfitters to lead Boise County Sheriff's Detective and Boise County Coroner and U.S. Forest Service law enforcement personnel, Idaho Mountain Search and Rescue officials, and a cadaver dog to the site where Thomas's items were found. Garlock, in an interview, said she was able to identify Thomas's remains with certainty due to a serial number on a medical device used in a knee replacement. How many people would even know that there's a serial number on a knee replacement device? She said Thomas probably succumbed to hypothermia due to a fall. Sprague told the Statesman in an interview that the group covered 20 miles backcountry on horseback the first day of the trip in early August. The following day, they reached the area where the wallet and clothing were found, about a half-mile from Benedict Lake, and began to search. Let me stop right there. These are important facts. Very important facts. Queens River Trailhead. This is where Jack started. This is where they started. Here's Benedict Lake. 20 miles. Now let me tell you something. There's no way Jack could have made 20 miles hiking in one day. I'm sorry, not that country. Yet he told people that he would be out on the 16th, and he said everything was okay and he was on track to come out. Well, he sure as heck was nowhere near there when he did that. Now you understand the complexity of what happened. Sprague said that as they located more items, like Thomas's ice axe, iPod, and cell phone, they had a clearer picture of where to continue searching. Eventually, they located skeletal remains, a day pack, and a SAT GPS device. A day pack. They never stated that they found his campsite, or his tent, or his primary backpack that he went in on. If he was hiking out, as he said, then those items should have been all in his main backpack, but they didn't find that. Thomas was a seasoned hiker who loved spending time in the backcountry alone, Sprague told the statesman. He said he believes Thomas, whose remains are about a half-mile from the trail, had left that route to visit nearby mountain lakes. On his way back to the trail, he may have experienced, quote, a tragic event that left him incapacitated, Sprague said. If something, quote, if something happened where he could have asked for help, he would have, Sprague said, noting Thomas was carrying a satellite GPS. Quote, he was a guy out there doing exactly what he loved to do, Sprague added. He loved that place. Amen. They were exactly right. Something unusual and tragic happened. They didn't talk about any landslide in the area, any earth movement. They left it very vague. But I'll say this one more time. Told his family he was coming out the next day. Nobody is walking from there to there in one day, 20 miles, which is the amount of distance that they traveled by horse to get to him the first day. They eventually got to him the second day. Sorry, folks, it doesn't add up. Just saying. But I'm very happy for the family that Jack was found. Give him a good burial. God rest his soul. Going out, doing what you love. Something to be said for that. Next case involves a young boy named Tim Adams, just 2 years old. He went missing October 14th, 10 a.m., 1961, from Christian County, Kentucky, about 10 miles north of the Tennessee border. Every time I hear Christian involved in anything regarding a location, I pay attention. There were 5 kids in the Adams family, and there were 3 kids in the yard with Tim. Now, the kids that were in the yard with him left him momentarily to go to a local spring to get some water. They came back. 5 or 10 minutes later, he was gone. They didn't think much of it. He didn't walk real well. He was only 2. They called the mom. The mom came out, and all the kids started to search. The sheriff stated that this area is filled with strip mine pits that were filled with water. Well, all those areas were searched the first day. The mom and the kids searched for about an hour. Then they called neighbors. Then they called the Kentucky State Police. When the state police got there at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they immediately called for more assistance. And they asked for neighbors, etc., to come in. So let me show you. Here's Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The home was located northwest of Hopkinsville, kind of west of Crofton, in an area that is very, very rural even today. And if you look, there's even a body of water, a lake right there. So the state police did the right thing for 1961. They organized neighbors into grids, areas. You take this area, you take that area, and they split them all up. And before they did that, the police were even smarter. They said, okay, where was the boy last seen? Showed him the front yard, and they started to search the front yard for tracks leaving it. They wanted to see if there was any animal predation possibility, that a cougar, mountain lion, bear come into the yard and dragged him away. Nothing like that had happened. They didn't see anything. They didn't even see his prints leaving the yard. Well, the state police were getting other state police officers from hundreds of miles away to respond to this incident. At the same time, the head of the state police department on scene called the Kentucky governor's office and asked them to contact Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and get soldiers responding because they weren't having any luck. Governor's office said they'd make the call, and by the end of that first day on October 14th, they had 150 searchers covering every piece of possible land anywhere around the Adams house. Everybody stayed up all night listening, hearing nothing. Nobody heard any crying. But on October 15th, at 5:30 a.m., 150 soldiers arrived in buses from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. This was a volunteer assignment. And they said that they could have filled more buses, but they ran out of buses. They had 3. By this time, also in the morning, the Red Cross and the Salvation Army had set up their wagons in the front yard of the Adams property, and they had mobile kitchens going with hot coffee and food for all the searchers. It was as though a small city had been founded overnight in this very rural Kentucky area. Now, what I was surprised about this is that this area is very rural. There aren't any huge cities nearby. Yet, the Salvation Army and the Red Cross all of a sudden show up and help. Let me say something. When I was a policeman, I worked with several natural disasters. And I was working at one point for the street crimes detail where we dressed up in plain clothes and in uniform and did all kinds of things in the downtown area of San Jose. We got pulled out at one point because there was flooding in a part of San Jose called El Viso. The whole town got flooded out. And we were trying to stop looting that was reportedly occurring. So we worked 12-hour shifts, and I was one of the low men in seniority on our street crimes team, so I got the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. It was kind of weird. We drove around on boats on city streets and looked for anyone, nobody could be there. And we did this for 10 days. And on the second day, the only agency that showed up was the Salvation Army. And I just got to say, they were the nicest people. They bent over backwards to be nice. They gave us food, sandwiches, coffee, for nothing. The people were so nice. And the people of El Viso that suffered greatly, they were there to help. I'm not saying that the Red Cross wasn't great either. They just didn't show up, but the Salvation Army did. And my experience, every time with the Salvation Army, I couldn't say one bad thing about them. Anyhow, I got a little off track, but let's get back to the story. So, at 5:30 that morning, the Civil Air Patrol put 3 planes in the sky for the second day in a row. And at 8 a.m., at 6 a.m., the searchers were all split up, soldiers all split up and given different areas. And at 8 a.m., Private William Daniels from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, was given a search zone. And his start point was about a half mile from the residence. And as he's walking down an old logging road, listening intently, he's walking. All of a sudden, he hears something behind him. And as he was walking, he was scanning both sides. And he hadn't seen anything, hadn't heard anything. Turns around, he just waits. And then he hears just a faint little cry. Walks back about 15, 20 feet. The cry gets a little bit louder. And he looks, and right off the side of the trail, about 10 feet, There's a little baby laying in mud inside a thorny bush. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. He reached down and he grabbed Timothy Adams, who was alive and now crying very loud. Private Daniels brought Timothy back to the home where they had physicians responding to look at him. He had mud all over his body. Night temps were 34 degrees. He had mud everywhere. Now let me explain something. 34 degrees, little baby, out all night in wet mud, should have a very bad case of hypothermia. Plus the fact that Private Daniels reported he found Timothy with no clothes on and just one shoe. Only one shoe. Timothy was alive and cold and survived. It was reported that the mother was in shock that Timothy was found over a mile from home, over an old rough logging road that he had never been on before. And how did he get in the middle of a thorny bush? None of it made sense. He wasn't suffering hypothermia, which by every means he should have been. There would have been a good shot that he might not have survived being in that wet mud at 34 degrees. So I don't get it. I don't get it at all. The commander of the search and rescue team said that the day before he had searchers walking that old logging road all day, every hour. He figured 8 to 10 people had to have crossed that path. Now Daniels walks by, doesn't see him either, and then boom, here's a cry. Was Timothy even there when all the people crossed? Or was he just placed there? I don't know. But none of it makes sense. But thank you for being here. That was 2 cases, one fairly recent that was just found, Jack Thomas. And Timothy Adams, October 14th, 1961, Christian County, Kentucky. Christian County? Play into it? I don't know. But anyhow, I appreciate you being here. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And please share it on your social media. Be nice to your family. Care about others. Good grace of the Lord. I'll be back soon. Paulides out.